Oh man, good morning, friends. There's like this awesome amount of glare like coming off of windshields and stuff outside. It's like the sun is here. And yeah, so are we. So friends, if you've been at Salt House for a minute, then you know that there are certain sermons that are like a little bit extra, sometimes a lot extra. And what I mean by that is sometimes as we're spending time in the story of Jesus, we also take time to like zoom out and see the bigger picture of where we've been and where we are and where God is leading us. And so guess what? Today is one of those a little bit extra days. And I'm so stinking excited about it. So for today, it's a really good and significant day for us here at Salt House. So I do want to make a plug, again, for you to plan to stay here. It was mentioned to stay here after worship or to call in via Microsoft Zooms from home for our budget forum. That's going to be led by our treasurer, Greg Fenich. He's actually here in person today. He's back from Arizona. I know. He's going to review our draft budget for fiscal year 23. So this really is your chance to come and like get your brain and heart around it and ask questions and help us shape and change what that's going to be, to make sure that if you're a voting member, then you can say yes when we vote at our congregational meeting on Sunday, June 12th. So this is your chance to find out about that, okay? So plan to be here after worship, all right? So today, get ready, because we have like miles and miles of ground to cover, okay? So I hope you hydrated. There is coffee if you need to go grab some, but we have 3 movements that we're going to work through today, okay? So dial it in, people, all right? Take a deep breath. Man, keep those good breaths coming. Get that brain getting what it needs this morning, all right? So movement number 1. We begin by turning to our scripture reading for today. So this is our final Sunday in our Easter sermon series on the encounters of Jesus after the resurrection, and we've been reading them and we're naming how we read it and we go, well, that's weird, how there are just such weird moments that happen after the resurrection. And today we continue into the second half of the weird text that intern Pastor Zach brilliantly spoke to last Sunday. So it's soon after the resurrection still. And one night, 7 of the disciples head back to fishing on the Sea of Galilee, and they catch nothing until Jesus shows up, which leads to this crazy full catch, right? The net comes up, and then Jesus is then cooking breakfast for them on the beach, right? Around a charcoal fire. So that's what we heard last week. And we're just heading into the very next verse after that. So we're going to hear that scripture. I want you to just place yourself in the text, okay? So smell the fish, smell the fire, feel the warmth from the sand between your toes, you know. So we're there with Jesus and Peter and the rest of them. And this will be read by Sean Mobley from home.
John chapter 21, verses 15 through 19. When they had eaten their meal, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, do you love me more than these?" Peter said, "Yes, Rabbi, you know that I am your friend." Jesus said, "Feed the lambs." A second time, Jesus put the question, "Simon, do you love me?" Peter said, "Yes, Rabbi, you know that I am your friend." Jesus replied, "Tend my sheep." A third time, Jesus asked him, "Simon, do you love me as a friend would?" Peter was hurt because Jesus asked, "Do you love me?" a third time. So he said, "You know everything, Rabbi. You know that I am your friend." Jesus said, "Feed my sheep. The truth of the matter is, when you were young, you put on your own belt and walked where you liked. When you get old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will put a belt around you and take you where you don't want to go." With these words, Jesus indicated the kind of death by which Peter would glorify God. Then the Savior said, "Follow me."
So again, if we're honest, this is yet another weird text, especially like this is part of this final scene in John's gospel. It's weird how Jesus asks Peter, not once, but 3 times, "Do you love me?" And for us, as we look on, we're like, dude, yes, like Peter loves you. Like, why do you keep asking, Jesus? You know, like we just have that kind of like, what? You know, there's something curious about what's going on here. But the 3 questions, or really the same question asked 3 times, it echoes, of course, of just days prior when Peter was asked another question 3 times. when Peter denied Jesus 3 times, denied that he knew Jesus and was one of his disciples. And the charcoal fire had burned that night, too, in the courtyard where Peter stood after Jesus' arrest. Peter denied Jesus, the one he loved, the one he had sworn to follow through anything, anywhere, even to death. So this is the third appearance of Jesus after his resurrection in John's gospel. And we've read through them all in these past weeks. And in these encounters, have you noticed who this Jesus is for his friends? Who on the road to Emmaus, the day of his resurrection, Jesus chooses nothing more than to walk with 2 who are heavy with grief, only to have them see who he is that evening at supper in the breaking of the bread. This Jesus who appears in the upper room with his disciples twice, he comes back just to make sure that Thomas is included too, and he breathes his spirit and he speaks his peace to them. Then in this scene that began with the beach last week, Jesus fills their nets with fish and cooks them breakfast on that beach. In each of these appearances, and yeah, they're weird for many reasons, but do you see how Jesus says in these texts, touch me, see me, feel me, know me, receive my peace, come and eat with me. Jesus is embracing his friends with such care. And it culminates in this final scene with Jesus and Peter, one of the most spectacular interchanges in the whole Bible. At this charcoal fire, it is their first moment together since Peter's denial. So Peter, just think about him. He must feel like such shame. Could he even look Jesus in the eye? He said he'd never do it. I'll never deny you, Jesus. And he did. What makes this so spectacular is that in John's final scene of this gospel, what's happening here is forgiveness, restoration. But how it unfolds is so weird because, Jesus is effectively asking, hey, Peter, are you still with me? It's Peter's chance to apologize, to redeem himself. And when Peter says, of course, you know that I'm your friend, you know I love you. Notice how Jesus doesn't say, well, then act like you love me, right? Like, come on, love me. The most remarkable thing about it is that by way of forgiveness, Jesus gives Peter a job to do. When Peter professes his love, Jesus doesn't say, well, it's all right then. He says, well, then, feed my lambs, look after my sheep, feed my sheep. We see Peter drawn back into the embrace of Jesus' love. And then from that embrace, Peter is sent to enfold others. Jesus has been feeding his disciples, right? He's been caring for them. So it is that Peter shall go and feed others now too. So you kind of feel how that unfolds. Notice with me how weirdly remarkable it is that at the conclusion of this gospel, so it's been this biography of Jesus, right? It's in which Jesus has demonstrated what it looks like to do God's work in the world. So after 20 chapters of that, it all boils down to this, that there is only one prerequisite to doing Jesus' work in the world, no other requirements. And it's just one question only. Do you love me? Do you love this God of the universe that we know in Jesus? This is what qualifies one to be sent into the world, to embrace, to feed, to love. Even someone like Peter can do it, who failed miserably. Even he just has one requirement: love. And so it is for us, yes? This is like such a good word for us in this moment now. For we are people like the disciples who didn't recognize Jesus on the beach. Man, we don't recognize life right now, not to mention like where Jesus is and all of the heartbreak that is around us. Things feel so disorienting, despairing, different as we try to kind of get back into our own fishing boats, into our own rhythms of life. Yeah, things feel unrecognizable. Like Peter, after all that we've been through, man, I know I feel the need to be drawn back into that embrace of love, to see and touch and know and be fed by God and given the peace of Jesus, which is why these post-resurrection days are packed with these weird stories of care and presence. Jesus, in his weird, wonderful way, is expressing, dudes, I'm here. I'm with you, loving you. Just pull up that net and see. I am with you, see. Like we read these stories so that we know it's true for us too. Jesus is saying, I'm here on the other side of resurrection, embracing you, even in all the ways that we feel lonely, distant, exhausted, struggling. We are embraced. Can you just let that sink in and meet you in all the ways that you are longing for that embrace? And from this place of love and of loving Jesus, we hear Jesus say to us too, look how you have all that you need to feed and embrace others too. From the embrace, we are sent to embrace and feed and love others. And I mean, this is really the gospel of Jesus in a nutshell, right? That we, all people, we are loved boundlessly by the God of the universe, full stop. And we are also loved to be love in the world, to love like Jesus as part of God's work to reconcile and renew and redeem and recreate all things. Which is why we keep coming back here together to tell this story and remember who we are and receive that embrace of love. And then to ask together, what does it look like to love like Jesus here and now? It's like we're here to learn how to be loved and how to love others in the way of Jesus, which is just amazing that this is what we get to do, right? And we get to answer this call to love in at least two different ways. First, we get to just ask that question individually. We each get to ask, what does this look like in my life? Where I am now. How would you answer that call to love? And we get to answer this call to love, right? As a community of Jesus-following people together who bring who we are and what we have in a way where the sum is far greater than the individual parts. It's our collaborative yes to God, and we live our yes to Jesus' question, do you love me? We do. Then let's get busy. And I marvel at what God has done here at Salt House, my friends, in our 7 short years of existence, and even in just the last year together, because 1 year ago, we asked this question together, how are we going to love others and feed and tend Jesus' sheep together? And we set an audacious goal. And if you've been around, you know that I'm talking about what we call our Leap of Heart campaign. As we listened for God last spring and just for what our next fiscal year would be together, beginning this last July 1st, 2021. And even though we were in the midst of global pandemic, still, racial reckoning, political polarization, and we still are. And maybe because of that, right, we wanted to say yes to all that we had been doing already, and yet also intentionally expand our ministry in 4 key ways. It was nuts, and it was our leap of heart, and we committed to it. Do you remember them? Do you remember the 4 things that we committed to together? So let me remind you, all right? So these are our Leap of Heart initiatives, the 4 things we leapt our hearts to in this last year. So number 1, we wanted to deepen our relationship with folks experiencing homelessness, especially at Kirkland Place. Second, to prioritize belonging deeply to each other by expanding our small groups in person as well as online, finding a place for our teens and youth for really the first time, and then also taking on an intern pastor. And third, it was just our use of technology and our online community. We wanted to invest our hearts to go towards each other, including via the tech we have access to, knowing that the quality of that experience matters and it is changing lives. Fourth and finally, we aimed to expand our hearts through expanding our impact for justice. Yeah, specifically in 2 key areas, racial justice and ministry with and for LGBTQIA+ folk. A piece of this was committing a portion of our offerings directly to that work. Not only did we want to work and be in that to stop the historic and current harm done to BIPOC, queer, and trans folks, but we want to say, hey, we have money that we set aside in funds that go directly to this work. So we had 1% of our offerings go to reparations fund that we started, as well as a queer fund. So that's what we set out to do. Our leap of heart, expanding our heart in 4 ways, which meant expanding our budget by $100,000, which was insane. And y'all, we said yes, right? And so here we are, like, what happened? Like, how has this year gone? Well, newsflash, COVID didn't go away like we hoped it would. But it has been an incredible year, which is why for the next few minutes, as we move into the second movement number 2 of this time, we're going to look back and celebrate some of the beautiful things that God has done with our Leap of Heart campaign, okay? Then we're going to use this as a pivot point into movement number 3. That will be like the share the vision and hope for how we want to love each other and our world with the embrace of Jesus in the next year to come, okay? So are you ready for some celebration and then some looking at where we're going to leap to next? Yeah, okay, cool. I mean, I thought so that's great. All right, so movement number 2, let's celebrate. So stretch out, here we go, second movement, all right? So I'm gonna just rip through some highlights. So just like hang on to your butts because we're gonna do some fast-paced good stuff, okay? And it's just like skimming the surface of just like the new things that God has done and been up to in this last year, okay? And it's gonna entail me kind of celebrating, bragging with you about our amazing staff. For they have just led us into such profound experiences of God this past year. So I'm just going to share some highlights. And as I do, listen for those 4 areas, right, of our leap of heart, like woven in their homelessness, belonging, tech, and racial and queer justice, okay? So all of the ministry that we do here together is collaborative, but usually one person kind of takes the lead, right? And much of the 4 initiatives that we leapt into last year, these were areas of ministry that expanded Pastor Ryan's role from half-time to full-time beginning July 1st, 2021. So Ryan led the charge for much of what we have done in this last year regarding Leap of Heart, including our engagement with homelessness. So you guys, so the new shelter opened in August of 2020. So this past year, as we showed up again in the building in September 2021, we were like, okay, we're like ready to figure out what this looks like, how God is leading us to engage with our amazing new neighbors, right? So this past year, Pastor Ryan designed for us key rhythms of practice. You know this, our habits, our practices matter, right? Because it's the things that we do regularly that really shape us. So Pastor Ryan designed 4 actions 4 times a year for engaging with Kirkland Place Shelter. So each quarter we do 4 things, 4 things. But it's the same 4 things. So first, every quarter, we have quarterly parties. So we gather together as one community, Salt House and Kirkland Place, for fun, food, and celebration. Like let's see some photos, our Leap of Heart backyard party that we had last summer, right? Our pumpkin party that we had in October, so good. Our Fat Wednesday party, first of many, I believe. And then our Easter egg hunt on Easter, right? So these are just like our parties that we do. So every quarter we have one. So we also have quarterly drives. So we gather the shelter's greatest tangible stuff, the things that they need. So we do Socktoberfest, socks and undies, right? In the fall, we did gas and grocery gift cards. At Christmas time, toiletries, that's happening now. And then we also gather supplies for welcome home baskets that go to folks as they find housing. Third, we do quarterly feasts. So we provide a feast, whether we make it ourselves or we hire a local caterer to provide an outstanding feast for the 100 guests at Kirkland Place. So we go for those really great feast days. So Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, and then a summer feast as well. So such good stuff, right? And then finally, we do quarterly service. That's like working together to build a shared gazebo in our shared backyard, or 7 of y'all who had training to become tutors at the shelter, or like our outdoor work parties as we work together on our shared space with our neighbors. So 4 actions, 4 times a year, engaging homelessness. Also this year, regarding homelessness, Pastor Ryan served really as spiritual care for the shelter staff and the clients. He officiated 2 memorial services this year for 2 clients who died at the shelter. And many of us here were part of that. We got to help with prayers and with music at those times. We also discovered our role as supporting the staff of the shelters, so caring for the caregivers, that we have a unique role with that as well. So we hosted a spa day here, which was so for the staff, as well as providing Christmas gifts for the entire staff at New Bethlehem Place. And then there's also just the beautiful reality that y'all, like we are a group of people in this church now that includes folks who are clients at the shelter, or who used to be. And so we've also seen a new diversity of folks here at Salt House in the last year, which is just such a gift, because as God's people, we are always living through change and transition, including times that are just so hard, like a time of being houseless. It continues to be a core practice for us here at Salt House that we together engage in homelessness. And that grew by leaps and bounds this year as we're discovering how we embrace our neighbors. So Pastor Ryan also led the charge with our reparations fund. So he worked to build the just infrastructure and the process for that fund that we set up, right, by forming our reparations board, designing the application and the selection process, how that would work. And we had our first biannual distribution of those funds to 5 Black recipients back in December. And the next reparations fund distribution is in 4 Sundays on Juneteenth. So be here for that, okay? Pastor Ryan also was key in kicking off Wednesdays at Salt House, WASH, as we call it. This is our midweek time where we gather everybody together, right? There's something for everyone. Most of our small groups meet at WASH, making Sunday mornings and Wednesday nights just our main rhythms of connection, in person as well as online. And we had small groups on the Enneagram and creativity and discernment and anti-racism, and our women's time for tea as a place to connect. There are other times where we meet too, like the men's group meets off-site for some fun stuff. There's a Monday night moms group. There's Lectio Divina. So there's just been so many opportunities this year for folks to connect and grow that value we had about belonging. So Pastor Ryan really knocked it out of the park this year in tackling the ministry leadership that we called him to do among us. So thank you, Pastor Ryan. Woo, it's good. Woo. So WASH was also the place where we launched our first ever Salt House youth group, Spark Youth for our middle schoolers. And this was a collaboration of Pastor Ryan and Rachel and intern Pastor Zach. And we have some amazing middle schoolers, you guys. They've been running, as you know, their Sweet and Salty Cafe. So they did that to fundraise funds to design their own youth group upstairs. And now today's the last Sunday of this round of Sweet and Salty Cafe. All proceeds go to Ukraine relief. So be sure to grab those gluten-free, dairy-free brownies that are delicious out there, and the other good things that are there too. Zach, make sure you get one. Yeah, okay. And to say a bit more about Rachel, so Rachel Horton is our Children and Families Director, and for most of this last year, so since September, Rachel, just think about what she does on Sundays. She would lead a Zoom call for younger kids, before worship. Then she would lead in-person Sunday school. Then she got another Zoom call with older kids after worship. So kids, whether they're here or at home, they had a place to belong, which was just amazing. And I can't even, woo, that's a lot. So she also was just, as she stepped in with our Spark Youth on Wednesdays, she's just been such a glue holding together our kids, because she's just known them for years, and that's just been such a gift. Rachel understands that each kid here has a unique way in which they feel enfolded in the embrace of Jesus, right? And she's so passionate about cracking that for each kid in their unique way. Rachel's just incredible. So thank you to Rachel, too, who's over there with our kids. Woo! So intern Pastor Zach. So Zach was up to the task that we had of we've been dreaming about it for a while, which was to start a group for adults that would offer queer and trans folks a place to belong and build connection and really be out about Jesus. So Zach launched and shepherded our Queer at Salt House group this year, which really just carrying forward our commitment to radical welcome into queer ministry. And you also just saw Zach the most and leading worship and preaching, which you're so gifted at too, Zach. So you've been such a gift to us. So thank you for your work among us too. In our hearts leaping. And as for Jason Bendixson, we all see Jason each Sunday here curating our worship with such subtle brilliance, right? The music here at Salt House is so well done and worshipful, in my unbiased opinion. But in addition to our music and worship experience, Jason also oversees our audiovisual experience, which, as you would imagine, last 2 years has been a lot. He creates all of our digital content, graphics, videos, you name it, and has been such an MVP in our expanded online and hybrid experiences. So Jason, you hold so much for us, and you are also our glue, just including It includes helping us just like get the equipment and software that we need and making it work, and just to help us be able to connect online with our community throughout the year, and in our, whether that's on Sundays or in our groups or in meetings, using our new Microsoft Service Hub. So friends, everything that we do, Jason has thought it through in some way and figured out how to make it work. And so thank you, Jason, and a huge shout out to our online community as well for watching, listening to the podcast, joining the groups. It's incredible that you are showing up in this work of just learning to love and be loved. It's awesome. But thank you, Jason, for all you do to make that happen. And though a volunteer, Linnea Anderson on the soundboard, you are also so clutch for us. So thank you for what you do as well. So next, behind the scenes on our staff is our church manager, Renee Stensby. And with all our Leap of Heart campaign and expanding the ways that we love our world, there was so much that needed to be done, like administratively, to support all of that ministry. So Renee had to trailblaze all of the back end of what it means for us to like have a reparations fund and a queer fund and our community initiatives funds for homelessness as well. Renee observed this year that though we are a relatively small church, administratively we function like a big church, given just all of the complexities that we have and the caliber that we function at. And she's right. And it includes that we have lease agreements with 2 churches and who worship in this space, right? And we have a family who rents the house that we own next door, and the New Bethlehem who rents our ground level and sharing the property with a shelter. That's been a big part of managing our Leap of Heart as well. It's so cool to like, just see pictures of like other churches that are in this space too. I'm like, right on. So it's a lot, and Renee has just worked her tail off. So we are just so grateful for you, Renee. Thank you. And my role I kind of hold that overseeing the ebb and flow of all of these as head of staff, as well as leading our arc of like sermon series and worship experiences, as well as holding like strategic vision and what we're doing and how God is leading us, as I oversee staff and collaborate with our church council and collaborate with our many partners beyond these walls. Thank you. So there's so much more that has happened than just this also in this last year that God has done, but here are just like a few highlights of the new things that have happened in our Leap of Heart, specifically around the things that we aimed to do, this expansion on top of everything else, which is just this radically welcoming and engaging experience of worship and life together that is uniquely just who we are with Jesus at the center here at Salt House. So friends, look what you did. Look what you did, right? Like, it's so good. This is what you made possible through your generosity. We call it our Leap of Heart, based on what Jesus says infamously in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus says, where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. In other words, what we give our treasure to, including our time and our gifts and skills, as well as, yes, our money, what we give to, our hearts are going to follow. Our hearts follow our giving. Our heart, it's formed by the ways that we spend our lives. And so we, as followers of Jesus, we attempt to be people who give, right, where we want our hearts to go. We say, yeah, I want to go there, so I'm going to put my resources, my stuff, my time, my money there. We let our hearts leap. So friends, thank you for leaping your heart here at Salt House this year. So again, to enable that expansion, we needed to grow our income by $100,000, which we committed to. And that was it was through increased offerings, your commitment, as well as grant funding that we applied for and additional income from that ground level this last year. And so I want to update you about how we've done. So we still have about 6 weeks left in this fiscal year ending June 30th. So we have seen, though, remarkable growth in our general giving, in our offerings, to support this life and ministry. And we expect to see 28% total growth in giving this year, which is just incredible. Like, woo! We do anticipate at this point a shortfall if giving tracks historical patterns in these final 6 weeks. So we anticipate a shortfall of about $17,000 at this point. But through our Leap of Heart pledges, so though our Leap of Heart pledges, they were just about fulfilled, like the shortfall was in our general giving, if that makes sense. Like we kind of like earmarked, this is what we pledged to, but like the general giving hasn't been as much. So that's where that shortfall is. And that could change. And even if it doesn't, we still have, we've leapt our hearts together to expand our ministries through 28% growth in offerings this year, which is just amazing. And to hear more specifics of how this all played out, stay after worship today for our budget forum, okay? Right. Now, movement number 3, okay? Are you still with me? I know this is a lot, okay? Whew, okay. So roll your shoulders back, get some good oxygen in that brain, because we find ourselves, like a year ago, with the opportunity to ask ourselves and to ask God, where do we want to give? Like, where do we want our hearts to go together? How do we want to together embrace this world with the love of God? How do we want to feed some sheep? What does that look like this year? I'm so excited to share what our church staff and our church council have just prayerfully set out as our ministry and mission priorities for this year ahead. You ready? You ready? Are you ready? Okay. So as we went through this process, the priorities that bubbled up to the top included, engaging with homelessness. I mean, that's just who we are, queer ministry, anti-racism. And as we had these conversations, we realized that the first piece in our priorities for next year was simply this. We want our hearts to keep leaping, as in all the ways that we have been leaping our hearts this last year. So to keep with homelessness, belonging in groups, online community, focus on BIPOC and queer ministry. We do have room to grow, but we are doing beautiful things here, right? God is doing beautiful things here. We will adapt and try things differently, absolutely, and I'll say more about that in a moment. But y'all, do you see how just like the highlights of what we talked about, the kind of impact we're having in each other as we grow, and with our youth and our kids, and with our neighbors at Kirkland Place, and with and for BIPOC and queer and trans beloveds? We want more of this, yes? Yeah, so we hear God saying, keep at it, beloveds. So we're prioritizing, like keeping at it. Now, in order for us to keep at it, there's one additional thing that I want to mention about this past year. So this is going to be like a little peek behind the curtain of what's happening at Salt House, okay? Whoop. So our staff, we had some significant kairos back in the fall. So kairos moments are those moments that grab your attention. They're significant. And it's an opportunity to pay attention and to go through the process with God to learn and grow. And our kairos was that we were so burnt out. And as we went through that and looked more deeply into it, we realized Renee, our church manager, she works 20 hours a week. That's half time. And we have a whole lot of ministry staff, right? Ryan and Jason are full-time. I work 3/4 time. Rachel's 12 hours a week. And then this year, we also had our interim pastor, Zach, right? So it's like we had all these ministry kites flying in the sky, this beautiful programming happening, all these awesome things. And then there's Renee on the ground trying to hold all the strings, right? And trying to hold it all together for us. We do also have Maya Russell, who works a few hours a week to support Rachel with children's ministry. So thank you, Maya. But our kairos was that we are so short-staffed in administrative support. There was too much for Renee to do. And we actually realized that Jason, especially being the amazing human he is, who steps in wherever he's needed, he has overseen so much of our administrative support as well, managing our database, inputting information, following up with inquiries, running to pick up the printing or communion supplies or just anything that we needed. And all of us were doing that too. We all on staff have been covering things that aren't ours to cover. So this next year, to keep our hearts leaping, we need to hire more administrative staff. So that's up there too. If we're going to keep at this, to continue the leaping of our hearts, that's the only possible way for this to happen is for us to have more administrative support so that our staff can continue to lead us in the way of Jesus together. Does that make sense? Yeah. Our amazing personnel team, they recommended a full-time benefited administrative position. And church council prayerfully looked at the numbers and didn't feel comfortable with that financial leap yet. And so the plan is to hire another half-time church manager to join Renee. Then Renee will focus on our accounts as accounts manager. So I want you to hear that we're intentionally, we're taking kind of a smaller step forward than we could as a strategy of growing towards what we need. Does that make sense? Yes? No? Okay. And so when you look at the budget in a few minutes, as Greg shares after worship, which you are planning to stay for, you'll see growth in the expenses of our staff for this reason, okay? So when you see that, we go, oh, that is so that we can keep our hearts leaping, right? Okay, so that's our sense of how God is calling us into more of this beautiful life together and how we can build a staff to make it more sustainable, okay? Okay. Now, that being said, it is a new year with new possibilities. And so there are some adaptations to our 4 initiatives that I'm thrilled about. So I'm going to call these our leap tweaks, which is just fun to say. So these are like tweaks to our heart leaping for our leap of heart. And I just want to list off 5 exciting ways that we are tweaking or enhancing our leap of heart this year, just our focused priorities. So here are our leap tweaks. First, you will also see in our budget for fiscal year 23 another staff position as well. We want to enhance our online presence with a priority for, so here's our first tweak, priority for social media and our public voice beyond our walls. So we do amazing things here, and we want to share it more widely in the world and join the online conversation in a more intentional way as a voice of love and change and influence, putting ourselves out there for the greater reach for the sake of our community, especially at this moment when Christian voices are not heard as inclusive and loving. So Jason was running with our social accounts, but he just doesn't have the capacity with all that's on his plate. And so, get this. We are hiring Zach Herzog. That's right, intern Pastor Zach, who's currently serving as intern. Yep. As he finishes his internship, he heads back to a final year of seminary classes. So he gets to stay on staff with us part-time as communications program manager, which is 10 hours a week. So Zach, he has a business degree, so he's just well-equipped to develop and initiate our communications platform as he's then also finishing school, which includes, so he'll be looking at social media and like that public-facing voice as well as our internal communications. So yay, right? Yay! Okay, and as we considered our number 2, our priority for queer and trans beloveds, there are 2 specific actions we're taking this year. First, we knew we needed to consider how our Queer at Salt House group would have continued leadership, how it would carry on with Zach finishing his internship next month. And so we're also hiring Zach to continue to lead Queer at Salt House so that more and more folk can continue to gather, providing that place to be out about Jesus together. So he'll also help us with that. Woo, 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 woo. Second, our second priority within that queer and trans beloveds area, man, we just deeply benefited from having Zach preach this year as our intern, for he provided a consistent queer voice from the pulpit. Yes? So we want to keep centralizing queer voices and hearing queer voices from the pulpit. So we're also adding Zach to our preaching staff, and he will preach at least 4 times, once a quarter in the year to come as well. So, yay! So Zach is sticking around in a whole lot of fun ways, is what we're saying. All right, so third, in our LEAP tweaks, we have a priority too for BIPOC beloveds, and we feel the same priority need to centralize voices of people of color from the pulpit at Salt House as well, which is why we're actively working to expand the diversity of our preachers with a person of color each quarter as well. We're hoping to hear from Pastor Ryan's mentor, Pastor Karen Ward, this summer, so we'll give you more on that as it develops, but we are committed to making that happen as well. Right, next, number 4, we also have a LEAP tweak around high school youth ministry. Like, we want to build on the success that we have from our Spark Middle School group, and I wish I could say that we are hiring a youth leader right now. Like, we need it, and I grieve that that just isn't happening right this moment. But first, we're tending financially to the kind of that back-ordered need of administrative support, right? So we're doing that. That's what we need to do now. Then, once we have the admin support we need, we see our next hire as being that youth ministry person. And if giving goes well this year, like, we could absolutely see a youth leader hired this year. But in the meantime, the staff, we're going to work to adjust Rachel and Ryan's time, especially along with some of y'all as volunteers. We need you to develop the first iteration of our high school youth program, building on the success with our middle schoolers at Spark Youth, so that we can continue to make beautiful things happen for this year for our teens. Yes? I just feel like the spotlight is just turning up on me right now. Is that true? I'm just like, oh, like, it's so good. All right, thank you, Sunshine. And finally, we also have a priority around building teams. So as we grow, we also know that the answer for life together here in community isn't just adding more paid staff, right? It's about using the staff that we have as leaders who enable and equip everyone in our community, in person and online, everybody, to have a way in which they own and share in this life and ministry at Salt House. So many of y'all are doing this right now, and we are so grateful, but we'll need more collaborators. Did you know this is how church works? Like, everybody steps in. Like, that's what you do. That's what church is about, and it's about diving in. So as the opportunities arise this year for y'all to step in and own a piece of life here, please pay attention to the nudges from God as to where you might say yes and join a team, okay? End of movement number 3, okay? You made it. And now the conclusion. Okay, so... Are you still with me? Oh, man, it has been a lot. It has been so much good stuff. But do you feel it? Do you feel where we have been, which is just incredible? Do you feel where we are headed, which just feels so right for right now? And my friends, do you want your heart to leap with us here at Salt House into all of these areas of impact and love? I want to hear a few hell yes, but... then my friends, will you consider what you can give? So here are the numbers, just a very high view, the numbers for next year. So next year, for fiscal year 23, so beginning July 1st, to keep our hearts leaping in the love we offer to each other in our world, it includes growth in general giving by $40,000, or 10% growth. Year over year. So again, for this next year, we're aiming at 10% growth in giving beginning July 1st, $40,000 growth. And there's so much more to say about our budget and what that number means. Did I mention you can stick around after worship? We'll also record it. So if you can't stay, you can also just listen to the recording. We'll at least do one of those things, yeah? So while we are also seeking other grants, income sources, we do need your help to grow our general giving on top of this past year's Leap of Heart initiatives. So this year we get to leap our hearts together again. And isn't it amazing that this is what we get to do together, right? And so I would invite you to begin to ask God what your family, what your partner, what do you want to give in the next year beginning July 1st? It is a common practice to give away 10% of one's income. And we do that here at Salt House. We give away 10% of what we receive. But there are so many different ways to consider what it means to live generously with what God has entrusted to you. And I just would invite you to prayerfully work towards choosing an amount and naming it and making a pledge to Salt House, because this has been beneficial for you. And you want to see this thing that we do together. You want to see it thrive and continue. And maybe because Salt House is expanding our ministry by 10%, maybe you'd consider 10% more than last year. That would be one way to look at it too. Or if you have never given, this would be a great time to give for the first time. So this is a conversation between you and God and your partner and your family, if you have them. But how do you want to give your heart this next year? We did hand out a little insert in your bulletin that I would ask you to take home with you. Also paste it in the comments. It's probably on the bulletin page. Jason will let you know how to find it. Thank you. It's on the bulletin page. Great. So please pull that out and take it home just as a little reminder of me to be thinking about this. It also are ways, some information, some of these numbers we've talked about, but it's also just some questions to think about and reflect on this. Ironically, we didn't have administrative time to sort out how the pledging works with our online system in time for today, right? So we'll let you know when and how to make that pledge official if you would like to do that. And again, if you can let us know, just lets us know if we're on track and about our financial stability for the year. So thank you for that. And after all of that I've said, as with all things at Salt House, it's okay if your financial picture right now is just impossible, or this just isn't for you right now. Like, you don't have to give. You are still fully welcomed, valued, and folded in love here, like full stop. So no shaming, just love. That's there too. And if you are new today, welcome to Salt House. Well done landing on the Sunday they talk about money, right? Actually, here at Salt House, we practice transparency with our finances, so you hear about it often. And we do that because Jesus talks about money all the time, more than anything else, because money is a spiritual issue, because how we spend our lives changes our hearts, and money is a matter of spiritual formation. So finally, Finally. Do you remember where we started? Do you remember we're on the beach with Jesus? Do you remember that? Do you feel the warmth of the charcoal fire? The embrace of Jesus as he looks in your eye with love and delight and maybe a little twinkle of mischief too. As he says, do you love me? There's only one prerequisite to doing Jesus' work in the world, and it is love. And Jesus says to you, well then, feed my lambs, tend my sheep. God is inviting you into loving action here at Salt House if your heart is longing and willing. And so again, in the year to come, we'll keep learning to love, being drawn back into that embrace of love again and again, to see, touch, know, feel, be fed by God, given the peace of Jesus, letting Jesus in his weird, wonderful way express again and again on the other side of resurrection, I am here embracing you. Even in all the ways that we feel lonely, distant, exhausted, struggling, we are embraced. And so, my friends, it's one of my greatest joys of my life, that from this place of love and loving Jesus, that we hear Jesus say to us together, look how you have all that you need to feed and embrace others too. From the embrace, we are sent as salt and light for the world to embrace, feed, love others. So my friends, let's keep making that leap of heart together. Amen? Amen. Amen.